Hello guys, ArtThieves here. In this video, I'll show you the process of modeling this stylized creepy mailbox in 3ds Max, Rhythm and Substance Painter. This is the first video of this series that will cover the process of modeling our prop. The video is quite long, so I'll keep the narration brief. However, I have included an improvised table of contents in the comments section below. Each part will have some initial comments. If my videos are of use to you, be my guest and subscribe to my channel for more stylized content. And now, let's get started. There's a great YouTube video by MS3D that covers the process of creating a stylized skull in 3ds Max. I use a similar approach, starting from a 3x3 relaxed box. However, I don't model the whole skull, focusing only on its frontal side. Also, MS3D's skull didn't have teeth, while I've made 5 really simple yet stylized teeth that fit my model properly. Basically, I start from a simple cube, relax it, and then create an initial shape by using basic polygon modeling. Then I move some of its vertices and splines while having the edge constraint function enabled. Also, I highlight its eyes by extruding some polygons that surround them before turbo smoothing my model. Most of the time I have the symmetry tool enabled. I only switch it off when I start working on the skull's upper jaw. Obviously we can use LODs here, but I don't do it, nor do I bake anything here. It is never a good idea for a top tier AAA model, but it can work fine if you're working on a prop for some indie game. Make sure to make most elements of the skull cartoony and thick. Also remember that turbo smooth will make them much thinner, so we shall always keep that in mind. At this stage I continue to simply move vertices and splines around, till I'm satisfied with the initial form of the skull. We don't have to model the rear side obviously, as it will be embedded into the mailbox itself. To create the upper jaw, I convert my model into an editable poly and make sure that all vertices of symmetrical parts are merged properly. I play around with the jaw, use Inset tool to create nose cavities, and continue polygon modeling till I am satisfied with the skull's form. We don't want to make our skull too realistic, and we want to reduce its poly count wherever we can. To use the skull as an attachable mask, we'll need to flatten the vertices on its rear part. Also make sure to check the looks of your model with a single iteration of turbo smooth now and then. I create nostrils by using Inset, Extrude and Scale tools, nothing special about them. Also, I move their edges while having the edge constraint function enabled. As you can see, I scale down the size of each internal cavity. When it comes to low poly modeling, details matter a lot. Also make sure to set your smoothing groups properly and see how your model looks with a single iteration of turbo smooth. At this stage, you may play around with the skull's eyes to define its character and facial expression. Using triangle shapes will make it look evil. I do some final changes to the low poly skull, play around with its facial expression just a little bit, and then set up its smoothing groups to see that there are no weird edges or shadows. The upper jaw is a placeholder at this stage. I wasn't using any reference image, so it works as an improvised blockout for me. At some point I start reducing its size, removing some unnecessary edges and preparing the jaw itself, so we can integrate some teeth into it. The trick here is not to create too many unnecessary details and consider the fact that turbo smooth will increase the amount of edges greatly. At this point I start thinking that creating a high poly version of each tooth would be a good idea, but my version also looks fine. Make sure that the jaw itself is pretty thick, for it will define the thickness of each tooth. I create the mouse cavity, or whatever it's called, fix topology and remove the rear side of the jaw, because we need to create a flat surface there. The point where the jaw ends will define the cutoff line for our mask. I add a swift loop while holding Shift to create a spline that considers the shape of our skull and use it to cut off the part that we don't need anymore. Then I fix smoothing groups and finally make the rear part of our mask flat. Next I apply Turbo Smooth, convert my model to editable poly, and remove some unwanted splines to trim down the poly count. As I've told before, I am not going for maximum possible optimization, but some steps work really nice here. Next I use the Edge Constraint tool to spread jaw edges more even, so that our teeth will have similar sizes. Make sure to keep the jaw thick enough, for it gets thinned by Turbo Smooth, and we will want to use inset on some of its polygons. Finally, I pull out teeth by using the combination of inset and extrude modifiers. I make their bottom parts thicker than their top parts to maintain stylized and slightly stupid look. Some teeth get an extra edge loop to make them look chipped and curvy. After I'm done modeling teeth, I add an extra edge loop for each of them, both on their top part and on their bottom, constraining their shapes from Turbo Smooth. When thinking of teeth height, make sure to consider that normally there's also a bottom jaw, so their size shall not be absurd. Here I add the curve I was talking about before. Finally, I Turbo Smooth the skull and add additional edge constraints to each tooth, defining their shapes properly. Then I convert my model to an editable poly and remove some unwanted geometry. I also emphasize the eyes of the skull, giving them a more cartoony and stylized look. And we're almost done with the skull. I only add some minor fixes to topology after this point. I won't be narrating it, so my comments will reappear in the next section. The second mask of face was inspired by Midjourney art posted by Pinterest user ArtCurious. It also got some features of an Amnesia Grunt enemy, plus I've decorated it with spiraling statues later on. I created the same way we've made a skull. The only difference here is that this mask has much less detail and only revolves around its painted decorations and abnormal dimensions, which means we don't want to make it symmetrical. After I'm done with eye shape, I get rid of symmetry and use the FFD 4x4 modifier to get the desired shape. Obviously, the prime difference here revolves around the shape of teeth. We want them to be curved, sharp and scary, yet not too realistic and horrifying. Make sure that this mask has almost the same height or depths as two other masks, for they will be positioned on the side of the mailbox close to each other. The modeling process here is quite similar to modeling the skull. There isn't much to narrate here, so I'll keep commenting in the next part. The third mask is inspired by a Legend of Zelda character. I used a similar design last year when modeling a stylized cartoony Tostra. The main difference here from two previous faces is the fact that we rely on automated retopology. This makes the modeling process much easier, yet it gives us some unnecessary polygons. I create the initial face shape the same way we've modeled two other masks. After I'm done with it, I use the ProBoolean tool to subtract multiple spheres from places where I want to add some fangs, horns, or claws, or whatever those things are. Next I define shapes of those horns with splines, and use the loft modifier to create horns. I create them from circles that have the same amount of edges as their attachment points, to make merging a lot easier. Obviously we can give those horns some loads and bake them as separate objects, but I'm not quite sure if it's really necessary here. When playing with automated retopology, make sure to remove all unnecessary polygons before the retopper. Also try and pick the lowest amount of target polygons that doesn't make horn attachment points too ugly. The rest is quite simple and doesn't require any of my comments. You can always slow the video and see what's happening. I'll continue narrating the video when we start modeling the mailbox itself. I've separated this part, for it is pretty long, and yet it covers the detailed process of using the loft modifier to create chin horns. The only thing to consider here is the fact that the amount of edges on the circle you use as a loft object shall be the same as the amount of edges on the attachment point. I'll be back in the beginning of part 5. I liked the eyes we've made for the third mask, but the second one seemed pretty weird to me, so I've used the soft selection tool to make eye hemispheres more flat there. Also, you can erase some edge circles and add new ones by using the Swift Loop tool while holding your Shift key. I remove some unwanted topology here and thin down the poly count just a little bit. Modeling the mailbox is much easier than modeling faces. The only thing to consider here is that we want to attach our masks, side bones and leg to flat surfaces, so we don't get some weird shading and also won't have to deal with overly complicated topology. We don't want the box to be plain, and also we want to break some symmetry. Having that in mind, I add some side edges and bend the top part of the mailbox by using the FFD tool. Remember that masks shall not be too tiny compared to the mailbox itself, and also that the box shall be as stylized as possible. I bend its top and add those bone horns or tentacles to its right side. Also, I make the metal frame and hinges as thick as possible. Also, I try to avoid simple hard edges here and give each of them at least a single chamfer. I'll continue narrating in part 7. Each side horn has 16 side edges and is created the same way we've made horns before, by using the loft modifier and smooth splines. I prepare some topology on the right side of the mailbox by splitting it into 3 major parts that will serve as attachment points for each horn. Then I create horns and embed each of them into a pre-prepared piece of geometry that reduces their poly count by 2 to 3 times. Then I position them properly, merge them to the mailbox, and rework their topology to thin poly count even more. This approach only works when attaching side objects to flat surfaces, otherwise we'd have to think about shading. I'll continue narrating in part 8. I attach masks to the mailbox the same way I've attached bones or horns. The trick here is to prepare connector parts that thin the poly count as much as possible, and then fix your topology manually. I simply extrude external edges and collapse each second of them, and then sometimes repeat the same process till I get the reasonable amount of polygons. This won't work if you are going for turbo smooth or making loads, obviously. It only works when trees are okay for you. After I'm done with external edges, I go over my topology manually by using the cut tool. I'll leave you here and continue narrating in the next part. The hinges are integrated into the mailbox itself, so none of their parts will move. I create hinges, position them properly, and use the ProBoolean tool to attach them to a previously detached frame to which they belong. I detach the frame from the rest of the mailbox to deny ProBoolean from messing with the rest of our topology. Modeling lag is probably the easiest part of the whole process. The only thing to consider here is giving it a nice curve, in my case by using the FFD modifier. You can always play with its ribs by pulling their vertices and edges around. Make sure not to leave some hard edges here. A single chamfer makes your model much more appealing to the eye. I'll stop narrating here. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like my videos, be my guest and subscribe to my channel for more stylized content. And most importantly, have a great day.